Everybody to this special session that we are organizing for on the occasion of Teachers' Day. So we'll have this session today in two parts. The first, we will have a panel discussion on teaching and different aspects of teaching, and we have to do that a very eminent panel out of our own faculty fraternity. So we have Professor Anjali Multani from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. We have Professor Narayanan Karur from the Department of Chemistry. And we have Professor Amitabh Bagchi from the Computer Science and Engineering Department. He's joining us online. And to kind of coordinate and walk us through this discussion, we have Professor Naveen Garg, also from the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, who will coordinate and moderate the session. So we will have initially remarks from all three speakers. Of course, the moderator will moderate the session. And after that, this is open to the entire institute community for opining. Of course, everyone else is joining here online. So this will be the first part of today's session. And after that, we will be having the second part, which we are all looking forward to also. This is the presentation of the Teaching Excellence Awards. As it happened last year, we could not do this because of COVID and other exigencies that happened last year. But so we will be actually presenting the awards for the last 4 semesters. And that is something which we'll do following the panel discussion. So with this brief introduction, welcome everybody again. And I'm sure many more are joining online. So may I welcome everyone again, and may I request Director Professor Rao to give us some initial remarks.
Okay, I would like to wish all of you a belated Happy Teachers' Day. I think I was also recently looking at our jobs. If you think of it, have become pretty complex. I think there was a time when, as a teacher, if you just start well, I think you have done your job well. Everybody was happy. So now teaching is one of the many things we all do, and research has become important. But if you just write papers without it, is all fine. But now, even that is not fine anymore. You have to write papers which are cited. And so now this patenting has also come into our lives. So earlier we thought if you file patents, it's okay, but now that is not okay anymore. You have to file patents which can be licensed, which can be transferred, and which can be used by others. So I think the bar is continuously going up. But whatever we do, I think we need to do well. I think that is a fact that is well taken. Also, these teaching awards, we have been talking about modifying the processes for award of for these awards. In fact, a committee which was formed for this has submitted its report. There are going to be major reforms now in the way the teaching awards will be given from next year. In fact, we thought we might even do it from this year, but then since we are already running a bit behind schedule, we have almost 3 semesters of teaching awards to be given. So we thought we will not delay it any further. But the next set of awards will follow completely different methods of evaluation. And also that complaint that you can receive the teaching award only once in your career at IIT Delhi was also, a little bit unwarranted or unwanted. So that also will go away now. A good teacher can be recognized with excellence in teaching awards multiple times. So that will be announced pretty soon. It has to go through the process and all that. But otherwise, I think COVID has also taught us many things. I'm sure many of you, probably have been able to adapt very well to the new COVID situation and able to retain your excellence. But this process also might have given rise to a few teachers who otherwise, were not as effective in the regular classroom kind of a teaching. Some of them have picked up these skills much better, when it came to online, and which is also good. I think when we go back to the normal times, hopefully it will be a hybrid kind of a model. So there will be classroom teaching, but there will also be, a lot happening online. I think that to me is the best kind of a way as we move forward. But otherwise, I think we have been dealing with the COVID situation. I mean, I don't say very well, but at least as good as it can be. And I would also like to congratulate all the awardees. I think it's not very easy to be awarded. You know how competitive these processes have been, and some of them have also been new faculty members, and some of them I am also happy to see international faculty members. So, which is a good sign. I think you are able to come to a new country and adapt to the new ways of doing things. I think which is all looking good. So thank you very much, and my best wishes to all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Rao, for your remarks. And may I now hand over the session to our moderator for the day, Professor Naveen Garg, who has, by the way, been on both sides of the teaching aisle in this institute. So he probably knows it from all directions. So Naveen, over to you.
Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you, Shantanu. Thank you, Professor Rao, for your kind remarks. I have the distinct honor of first introducing the three panelists for the day. I'll go in the order in which they sent me the bios. So Anjali Multani, who sent it last. Anjali Multani teaches literature at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. Prior to joining IIT Delhi in 2003, she taught at Gagi College, Delhi University, and at JNU. Her PhD was from JNU and on the politics of English language theatre in India. Her research and teaching interests include theatre, contemporary fiction, young adult, and speculative fiction. Welcome, Anjali. Other panelist is Professor Narayanan Kurur. Narayanan Kurur is a professor in the Department of Chemistry, IIT Delhi, where he has been since 1997. This was the same year I joined IIT Delhi. Prior to that, he spent a year apiece at Dr. Reddy's Research Foundation, Hyderabad, and the Regional Research Laboratory, Trivandrum, after obtaining his PhD at Caltech and postdoctoral stints at the University of Lausanne and Stockholm University. He researches on NMR methodology. Welcome, Narayanan. The third speaker is my colleague from computer science, Amitabh Bagchi, who's joining us online. Amitabh Bagchi is a professor in computer science and engineering at IIT Delhi. He got his BTech from the same department he now teaches in, and his PhD from Johns Hopkins University. Amitabh's undergraduate teaching has largely focused on second-year courses like data structures and discrete mathematics for computer science. His research interests are in algorithms, graphs, and probability. Thank you for joining us, Amitabh. And our plan for this afternoon is that we will have short talks by each of these three panelists in which they lay out their vision of teaching. And we'll follow that up with a discussion, maybe about a 30-minute discussion, and then we'll open this panel to questions from the audience and all other attendees. So I first hand it over to Amitabh to give his short talk.
Thank you, Naveen, and thank you to the Institute Lecture Series Committee for inviting me to be part of this panel. Professor Roy mentioned that the panelists are eminent, but since I teach alongside my own teachers, I feel that my eminence is probably still imminent. Of course, Anjali and Narayanan are no doubt eminent colleagues, and I'm happy to be alongside them. There is a temptation, I feel, when we think about teaching to give it a sort of ancient genealogy, since teaching and learning has probably been with our species since our species came along. However, it strikes me that the process of teaching and learning is always embedded in the present moment, in the current moment. It's historically located. And so, in order to talk about, when we were discussing this panel with Pritha, the title that Anjali suggested was Visions and Revisions. So, talking about vision and revision takes place in a historical moment. And I want to draw your attention to two particular aspects of the moment that we find ourselves in. There are two crises that we are facing, one of which is not a very positive one, an unhappy crisis that we're dealing with. The other one is maybe a positive crisis of some sort. So the unhappy crisis that we're dealing with is, of course, that of climate change, and the fact that the methodology the human species has adopted over the last century or two, its unsustainability is now increasingly becoming clear to us. And some kind of radical change in course is required. Otherwise, our species is threatened. At least the way of living that we have gotten used to is under some threat. That crisis is not a very happy one to contemplate, but it is there and we cannot look away from it anymore. The other crisis, I feel, is the one of the growing clamor for equity, the call for an end to marginalization of marginalized groups. And that call is becoming louder and louder by the day. And it is becoming harder and harder to ignore it across the board, although in some places it can still be ignored. And in some places, growing equity or the end of marginalization is also being reversed. But on balance, it is no longer possible to ignore this, and it is another crisis of our times. My feeling is that I've been called here in some way to represent engineering, and my colleagues represent the humanities and the basic sciences. And I want to give credit to the humanities, the basic sciences, and the social sciences, because they are the ones who have provided us with a language to describe and understand these crises that I'm talking about. And we give credit to them for laying it out in front of us. And but also they've made it kind of inconvenient for us, because by explaining and unfolding these crises in front of us, they have made it incumbent upon technology to now raise its game and deal with these crises. And this is the context in which I want to present my remarks. So I think I'll go to my thinking about teaching now. I feel that knowledge has an aura. There's an aura to knowledge, and anyone who has learned understands that there is an aura. It is something that happens in the interaction between the individual and that thing, that intangible, the concept, the idea, the calculation, whatever you might want to call it, the observation. There is an aura to that process, and that aura is somehow central to the human experience. I think it is there across cultures and so on. Now, when this process of learning is mediated by another human being, the teacher, then that aura enters into that teacher's person. And that teacher, that individual begins to personify that knowledge. And this is true even today. Even in the day of online teaching, where I look at a screen and I can't see the faces of my students, at that time when some of my colleagues say, oh, we can't interact with them and this and that. And I think that, but what are you saying? Eklavya didn't have that problem, right? Eklavya just had a bust of his teacher and he still learned from that teacher, right? So I think that that aura exists no matter what the situation. And it inhabits the teacher, it enters the teacher, and the teacher person begins to exude that. And with that, what that aura brings is it's a kind of responsibility. And we all know that. All of us who have been teachers in any context, even if it's just been teaching our kids something at school, at home, we know that that there is a responsibility that comes with being a teacher. And we also know that the nature of that responsibility is effectively moral. It is a moral responsibility of some kind, although the term moral itself may be under some discussion, but there is a moral responsibility. Now, there are several characteristics, perhaps, of this responsibility, but I want to highlight three characteristics. The three characteristics that I want to talk about are honesty, generosity, and humility. And the funny thing about these characteristics are that there are others also. I mean, I don't mean to say that these are the only characteristics. A teacher, for example, they say must be sincere. I didn't include that in my list of characteristics because I feel that someone who's charged up with the idea of teaching, who understands what energy that teaching brings to his or her own person, cannot be anything but sincere. Some people are sincere in everything that they do, and we have all been lucky to have certain teachers. And then there are others who, may be late in returning the exams or whatever, but when they're in lecture, they are the best. Other people don't lecture well, but they are very sort of uh, they do the other aspects of their work. They give time to the students, answer their questions, etc. Whatever it is, I think we all know who is a teacher who's just filling the shoes of a teacher, because the true teacher is always present, because the presence in that job, in that role, actually gives that person also something much more than a salary. So I don't worry about the sincerity of teachers, although the dean is sitting there, and since I'm not in the room, I can't see his expression, but I'm sure he's rolling his eyes. It's like, yeah, you're talking about sincere teachers, okay, anyway. But I can take that up with Shantanu at another time. So I talk about honesty, generosity, and humility. The thing about these characteristics are we have to own them and we have to transmit them. This is this is part of the original vision of teaching. I mean, when I say original, I mean across cultures, these ideas are somehow there. So I'll discuss these ideas and I talk about the revision that I'm talking about in each one of them. So honesty, right? The teacher must be fair. The teacher must not have any favorites. The teacher must admit to the limits of his or her own knowledge, must not pretend to know everything, right? Must not do anything wrong, explicitly wrong, must not be seen to break the rules, etc. The teacher must be honest at all times. And the funny thing is that the teacher also has to communicate the notion that honesty is a virtue to the students. And this goes way beyond policing. It's not about just catching cheating or penalizing plagiarism and all. All that, of course, is part of our job. But the greater part of our job is to somehow communicate the idea that honesty is a way of life which is desirable. And this is a tremendously difficult job to communicate this in a world where people are being dishonest every day and benefiting from it. But nonetheless, this is one of our jobs. How do these revise in the face of the two crises that I mentioned? Firstly, as technologists, we must admit that technology has brought our species to the brink. That is, I think, honesty demands that today we must say, yes, we have made a mistake, and accept that and say, all right, right, mea culpa. We must also, on the other front, on the front of inclusion, marginalization, we must also admit that technology has caused, and while it has also reduced marginalization, largely technology has caused greater marginalization. This morning in the newspaper, there's a article about how in the face of this COVID crisis, those kids who had access to internet, their education continued to some extent, but those who didn't, and they have had a huge chunk of their education life at a critical time in their development just fall out. So honesty today, as an academic, as a teacher, involves, as a technologist, involves admitting, yes, we have made these mistakes. We are continuing to make these mistakes, right? And it is part of our moral responsibility. So that's the revision. That's what honesty means today, more than what it meant earlier. Let's come to generosity. So what does generosity mean for a teacher? You have to give time to your students. You have to give them space to grow. I know Naveen was talking about how in an earlier time, teachers and students would meet outside the classroom also, and spend time. Their they would be mentored, have that relationship. Apart from that, generosity also means giving credit where it's due, um, and not taking credit for yourself, sort of saying, okay, so and so did this and they should be given credit, and so on. That's what generosity used to mean. In general, teaching is an act of generosity, no doubt. But we have to teach the students how to be generous also. We have to teach them to help each other, teach them to be unselfish, teach them that knowledge is a means to go outside beyond yourself. It is a route away from yourself. It's a difficult job in a society which encourages people to look out for number one. But we have to do it. It is part of our job, and sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail. But now the demands of generosity have gone a little further. when we look at the crises that are in front of us. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we consume less? How do we develop technology in a way that reduces the Earth's burden? This has to become part of our teaching. We have to inculcate generosity into our curricula at the line item level within our course templates. That idea that we need to be less extractive, we need to reduce the Earth's burden has to come into our curricula. We need to look how to understand how to share space with others, reduce the marginalization of those who are deprived of their share. Can technology help? Can technology, which if we have admitted has made things worse, can it help in bringing those people in and giving what is their right? Can it quantify what is their right? These are the questions we have to ask. And this is where the teacher's generosity has to now take one more level and address the questions that are in front of us. Last one, and then I'm going to finish, and that is humility. Humility is very hard. I've ever since I became a professor, I realized that arrogance is an occupational hazard in our occupation, and it's not our fault, right? I mean, because every day we go into class and we are right in front of us, there's so many people who know less than we do by definition, right? They're students, they won't be there if they didn't know less than we do. As a result, we start thinking that we're smarter than them, we are better than other people. I've seen this I mean, in fact, occasionally when in a committee or somewhere where when I see some colleagues acting arrogant, acting like they know more than others, I feel bad for them. I feel that, this job has brought them to this pass, to this kind of moral degradation. But humility is essential. It's essential for us as a teacher, as a human being. And it is also essential for us to communicate this to our students. And that's very difficult if we are not humble ourselves. And it's difficult because we have to inculcate a balance between confidence and humility, right? Where does confidence bleed over into arrogance? Right, that is we have to be able to know where that line is, and we have to draw that line, and the students must know it, right? So I mean, practices like admitting that you're wrong in class, right? These are small things. Maybe there are other people have other ways, but our own humility, the humility of our person, and the humility that they must inculcate, these are things that are critical and are probably humility is the hardest of these characteristics, the way I see it. So when we come to the crisis facing us, we have to accept first, in all humility, that the crisis facing a planet is a difficult challenge. And for our long-term survival, humility has to be coded into our everyday teaching practices. It has to be, again, I say, it has to be in the line items of the course template. It has to be in the evaluations. It has to be in the reading material. It has to be in our thinking. It has to be in our body, in our person. And there is no other way that our species can get through this challenge unless we take on humility as the number one aspect of our teaching practice. Right. And as far as inclusivity is concerned, as far as technology is concerned, I think a more basic, simpler idea is that we must have the humility to know that technology is built for users. We must go out and bring in people, ask them what do they want, and then build that rather than build something that they think they want and then try and sell it to them. So that's all I have to say. I think I've pretty much taken my time. Three characteristics: honesty, generosity, and humility. Two crises which push us to take these concepts further. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Amitabh, for the very thoughtful remarks. We'll come and cover some of those points, hopefully, in our discussion. Next, I would like to request Narayanan to give some short remarks.
Thanks, Naveen. I'll take your eminence baton and pass it on to Anjali. She's sitting right beside me. There you go.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And she has no way to hand it over to. She is it. She will hold it. Right. I was wondering from when I got suckered into it, I think. Pramit asked me, panel discussion. I said, well, not a big deal, And then Pritha told me 20 minutes to talk about teaching. And I said, my goodness, 20 minutes class is bad enough. 20 minutes about something that more or less one has lived is very tough ask. So I say that, well, it hurts to have friends in the important places is the way I blame this. So in any case, we are all, I think, and Amitabh has set the stage, he's talked about some profound things. I'll do more grassroots classroom stuff. I haven't thought about the things that he's talked about. So it's good in some sense. It's complements some of the things that I talk about. So we're all, I mean, I was talking to somebody who said on Teachers' Day, said that, look, I'm basking in the glory of messages that I've been receiving from BTechs and people that I have taught 20 plus years ago and all sorts of things. So now I'll bring you to ground level. Bernard Shaw is supposed to have said, he who can does, he who cannot teaches. So now we're back at ground level. So that's where we are. I don't know what made him say that, but that's a pretty terrible insult to the teaching profession. And the way I sort of explain it to myself is to use Hardy's line to say that, look, I hate teaching, but I used to lecture. I liked lecturing and to eminently capable students. As to whether students are eminently capable, that we'll worry about a little later, but Hardy at least. That's the way he justified it to himself. So what I know of teaching, or a little bit I know, is all tentative. It's all contingent, and it's all uncertain. And I learned it by doing it or living it. And so it's all necessarily ragged, rough, and unfinished. And it is true, I think, of most of us, because Richard Felder, who is a professor in chemical engineering, Shantanu would know, is at NC State, is a very distinguished person. And if I would recommend all of us who is here to look at his website. He has a fantastic website on teaching resources for engineers. I'm not one. And he says that college teaching may be the only skilled profession for which no preparation or training is provided or required. So I think we are all in the same boat. So we are all swimming. Yeah, so now I have to also situate myself as to where I come from. I am trained as a chemist, and I teach chemistry, which in most parts of the world is considered an experimental science. I say most parts of the world because at least the students, a fair fraction of the students that we teach, it turns out have never seen a chemistry lab. So it's more paper on pencil or pencil on paper and getting an answer to some problem. So it is an experimental science in rest of the world, but and this is even for PG students. You'll be very surprised. People who have finished 3 years of BSc in an undergraduate university come here. And I know somebody who is here now in the second year of MSc, and she says, never been to a chemistry lab. And it's an experimental science, mind you. Well, at least we fake ourselves into believing that it is an experimental science. And I am, if I go more specialized, I'm a physical chemist. I say this because what I teach for the undergraduates, which is what I have done for a significant amount of time, is to teach the physical chemistry portion of the first year engineering chemistry. And since Pritha said that this is beamed up to other places, I have to say that engineering, we don't teach engineering chemistry in most IITs, it's chemistry. And I think that's true of mathematics too. I see Puneet sitting here. So I think we don't teach engineering chemistry because engineering chemistry is just, just content, knowledge, which is perfect for online. And I'm a physical chemist by training. And physical chemist, for those of us who are not aware, is, according to G.N. Lewis, one of the most famous American physical chemists, never to get the Nobel Prize, if that's a tag you want, said physical chemistry is the study of anything interesting. And more specialized, I do nuclear magnetism. And the connection in nuclear magnetism, the interest is that the beauty is, at least for us, many of us, is the close connection between theory and experiments. So the way I teach chemistry is that this established, so it's all, that's why I set the stage, because I teach chemistry, and the way I do it is to try and establish a connection between what students see around them, because chemistry, that's another thing that we all like to talk about. And there are 3 of my colleagues who are getting the awards today. So we all like to tell the students that chemistry is all around us. So it's to be able to explain what they see in terms of simple things. And again, you have to situate it in the, what engineering education is presently. I mean, after Carl Compton, engineering is is applied science, if I might call it that. It's not just skill development. So in that sense, so that's the idea. And so the way I've taught more recently, and that's where my revision is not of the type that Amitabh was talking about in the curriculum and things like that, is that it's a constant revision for me. I remember that when I first started, I pored over books and looked at contents and wrote copious notes. And then with time, I figured none of this works. I just go there and wing it. And yeah, but the idea is that, and because if you're teaching undergraduate chemistry, for example, I am very clear that I don't expect them to know any chemistry, even after the semester they're finished, let alone, but we hope to be able to transfer the excitement, at least to a few people, that, look, you can explain it. Because one of the things that we see is if you talk to undergraduates, and we have a lot of them here, well, maybe things have changed recently, they'll say that chemistry is the most illogical thing. Or they will say, I hated chemistry. And it is relative to, and this is also how it is taught. So it's people think that it is all rote memorization. I think memorization happens in all subjects to some extent or the other, but it's taught as if I know that my son is in 12th grade. He tells me there are 256 equations to memorize. My goodness, is this something that we need to know? But yeah, so I try to explain it. So I don't do nitty-gritty details. I'm not particularly concerned about whether an equation has a minus plus. But to be able to explain this and then use a scientific method to arrive at something, that's, I think, the excitement that one would like to get across. And the other vision that I have is I'm not a PowerPoint person. I think I've rarely used PowerPoint presentations. So I tend to write on the board. And these days, this is fantastic. I mean, you can write and beam it to 600 plus people. Fantastic job. Yeah, so and I don't write these equations. I don't go with a prepared sheet. Today I've come with a prepared sheet, and I've already lost the script. So yeah, I don't write equations because I believe that they have to go and do their work themselves. I treat even the undergraduates as adults. If they can vote, then they can study on their own. We are there to sort of show them the way, but the work has to be done by them. But yes, I do a few things like in class. I have this thing about active learning, and this I have had in my teaching philosophy. And this is again a statement, a pearl of wisdom from Confucius. He says, "I hear and I forget. I see and I remember, I do and I understand." I've had that in my teaching philosophy. So I try and do this a little bit during the class. Even if it's a big class, I walk around. Yes, I tell them to pull their notebooks out of their bags and take their pen out and solve something which is up on the board. Yes. So in the end, what happens is that, as Victor Weisskopf says, and this is something that I used, I don't know, in some curriculum review or some meeting like this, I can't remember, because Nomesh Bolia pointed it out in the faculty forum, and it's a quote due to, I like quotes, by the way, if you have not figured it out. Victor Weisskopf says that after he met some he was an MIT professor, a physics professor, and he said that after he met a young faculty member at the end of the semester who said that, look, I covered so much stuff, Vicky. And he says, you guys are interested in covering a lot of stuff. I'm interested in uncovering just a little bit. So because of this active learning, I end up only uncovering a little bit. And the rest of it is that they have to figure it out for themselves. Yeah, so one of the things that I have done, and this is something that I picked up from the math literature, is a person named Stephen Zucker that you might know, Amisava. He is at Johns Hopkins in the math department. And they have the same problem with calculus. Calculus is a big, for first year freshman, calculus is a terror in the US. And so what he does has an academic orientation. And I've approached Shantanu about it. And he says that you're no longer in high school. And then he lists out a lot of things that is done differently in college as opposed to in how things happen in high school. I've done the same thing, but I think it needs reinforcement from other teachers as well, maybe administration, that things happen differently in college. If you expect people to be spoon-fed, not happening. So that's the other thing. And because I'm an experimentalist, and this is the last thing, I've particularly enjoyed lab courses. It's not something that people like to go to, but I like going to lab. I sit through all the 4 hours or whatever it is. And that's when you realize that whether students are able to, in their mind's eye, so you could tell them that, look, here's the handout, and they need to look at every step. You know, what is it that I need to do? I need to mix this, I need to mix that. And you ask them that, look, your mother or whoever it is in the kitchen does not ever look at this, you know, the, what do you call it? Recipe. That's right. But to them, it's that final answer because they have been told in high school, it's got to be, your record book has to be squeaky clean. It's got to have, and so that's what it is. It's not about learning from doing something, even if it is wrong. The fun is lost. But there are some who like to get their hands dirty. And I have quite enjoyed, and you ask them a few questions, you know, what is it that you're doing? That's when you learn how much they have understood of what's going on. So I guess, I don't know. Yeah, the other thing is that chemistry, and Arun Kumar in computer science always, ribs me about it. Chemistry is one thing where we compartmentalize. We say inorganic, we do it in our teaching also. We have 3 different teachers for inorganic, organic, and physical chemistry. And he always ribs me at the first possible opportunity. And but yeah, that's something that I try to do, is to make it appear that it is a coherent whole. We might be doing different things, but the approach is as a chemist. And so I think it's all what I talked about is practical things. And it's everything. There's probably one vision that is active learning, but otherwise it's all a revision. So I think Pritha's suggestion of vision and revisions were probably more appropriate in my case. On that note, I think I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you, Narayana. That was very, very thoughtful again, and also a lot of aspects I think that we would like to cover also in our discussions again. So now next on to Anjali. Welcome, and your remarks, please.
Thanks very much, Naveen. So first of all, thanks to Pritha and Shantanu, I think, for this opportunity. I don't see an HSS person actually being on this panel for an institute lecture in any other context. So I'm glad that I'm here, if just for that.
Get over that now.
But sometimes you can't resist the little poke. Right. And so I was very wary, as Pritha knows, when I actually squeaked and I said, there's no way. And she kind of said, 20 minutes, half an hour, not much. And I said, look, I can talk about, as Narayanan just said, 20 minutes, half an hour about almost anything. But if I'm told I have to speak for 20 minutes, half an hour, then I immediately will seize up. And then the second worst thing happened, which is I was told that the panelists were going to be Amitabh and Narayana. And then I said, okay, this is almost as good as getting a Teacher's Day award. Because if these are the 2 people who are talking about their teaching experiences and I'm on that panel, I'm not, going to think about it anymore. So I'm really thrilled to be here with the two of them. Although my one, again, little complaint is that although they protested and said, we can't speak for 20 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, I noticed they did pretty well. I, on the other hand, being the human person that I am, took everybody at their word and prepared a fairly short and succinct little piece to speak about. That's the aim. I'll riff as I go. So I think both Amitabh and Narayanan actually did talk in many ways about whatever they talked about shows you that there fundamentally isn't that much of a difference in a teacher. I mean, you could be teaching engineering, you could be teaching science, you could be teaching social science, but it is in your attitude and your approach as a teacher, there's nothing very fundamentally different if you're a good teacher. And the other good thing, of course, is that in a place like IIT, you have all sorts. So Narayanan reminded us, those who can do and those who can't teach. Amitabh writes, I teach about writing. So you have that kind of distinction and overlap here as well. Again, going back to something Amitabh said, he talked about teaching being ancient lineage. Mine is shockingly ancient. I joined IIT Delhi in 2003. Towards the end of 2003, but still a very, very long time ago. And my previous academic experience had actually all been in universities and very mainstream departments of literature. And even the college I went to was known much more as a humanities liberal arts college than it had a wing of science. And people tell me the science people did pretty well. Some very eminent people have graduated from there. But for us, Xavier's was only about the arts. And I think it's with that kind of an arrogance that I grew up, so to speak, in my undergrad and my postgrad days. St. Xavier's, even overseas, and then JNU for my PhD, was very much feeling like I was in the center of things, at least in the center of my academic world. And then I heard about IIT, and IIT was a bit of a challenge for me because somebody very casually remarked that IIT mein naukri milne ke liye, all the 9 houses of your astrological chart have to combine. You have to be below 35. You have to have a first class all the way through. You have to have a certain level of publications. And I was like, well, this sounds like a nice challenge, and let me try and take it up. And I applied here. Much to the absolute horror of most of my colleagues and my peers in those days. And most of my mentors were like, what's wrong with you? You can't possibly spend your life and your time teaching electives to engineering students. Like they were a completely different morphology or something. And I kept saying, but look, Alok is there and other very eminent people are in the humanities and social sciences department in IIT. And they were like, oh, no, they're there for their own reasons and they're all eccentric and you don't want to be like that. But I luckily stood firm, and equally luckily I was offered the job when I interviewed and I accepted it. So when I first joined, when I first started teaching, actually, and this was when I was teaching as a PhD student in GNU, a very good friend of mine gave me extremely valuable advice. And she said that in order to become a teacher, you have just vowed to spend the rest of your life as a student. And I think that was the primary vision with which I embarked on my teaching. So when I first walked into an IIT classroom, and this is why I gave you the context of being, so intellectually arrogant, as Bakshi was saying. I mean, you just think you are at the center of your own academic universe. So I walked in, and this was a very interesting lesson because the first lesson was never take anything for granted. And this cuts both ways. You may think students know stuff and they don't, and you may actually think they don't know stuff and they surprise you by knowing it in many ways, maybe better than you do. So in a normal mainstream college, university, English department classroom, there are certain shared assumptions and values. There was no such comfort zone in the first undergrad class I took here. So my first semester, I was teaching a course on theater. And as a very casual kind of remark, I said something about how you can't draw these distinctions between plays and poetry and so on. And of course, Shakespeare's plays, as you all know, fatal words, never use them. As you all know, Shakespeare's plays are full of the most beautiful poetry. And I just moved on seamlessly. And then a hand went up and a student asked, why? What makes Shakespeare's plays or poetry so remarkable? And this is, please remember, in a mainstream context, a blasphemous comment. And it just took me completely by surprise. And then I realized I didn't actually know how to explain this, not without recourse to, again, it becomes tautological. You just keep referring back to things that people will know. And then I came up with this, one of my favorite lines. I use that if you all are curious, and in the interest of the 20 minutes, I'll tell you. The line was from Macbeth, and Macbeth says this when the doctor comes and tells him that his wife has died. And he says she should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. And then he embarks on this soliloquy, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Now, just that one line, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, for me was a vehicle to explain to my students why that was so profound. Just the repetition and the syntax and the philosophical resonances. And this was one of the, I still think, one of the most lively and memorable classes I have ever participated in. Every basic premise was checked, and these students didn't give up. It didn't matter to them that I had a PhD in literature. They still questioned me rigorously, robustly, curiously. They came and said, can you give us more stuff to read? We'd like to, check up on this. And this new energy, I went back just completely exhausted, but really full of this energy that I need to reorient my approach to my own subject because of this one group. So the goal I try and maintain through teaching my BTech classes is to enable the students not just to think critically. I assume all good education will have that goal, but to make them see that texts can be both interrogated and read critically. The idea of a problem in a literary text is to try and see it from multiple points of view and to examine not just the language and the form, but the context to bring to it one's own experiences, one's own evaluations. And of course, PhD classes are a little different in the level of expertise that students bring to the room. But I think the goal is similar in the sense that there should be no idea of received knowledge. And I think this ties in with what Amitabh was saying about humility. You can't I can't and I shouldn't expect my students to accept what I say without it being scrutinized, without it being examined, without them checking where I'm coming from. Every idea, every word should be closely evaluated and weighed in its own context, but equally importantly, in its present context. If you're questioning me, question the text. If you're questioning the text, question the world around you. I like to think that they start the course, and this is what I tell my students, that these are the questions I'm posing at the beginning of the course. At the end of the semester, I hope you don't feel you have the answers, but you have your own questions. And if you can do that, then I feel I would have been a little bit successful. My job as a teacher for me doesn't begin or end in the classroom. Discussion and learning is not just about educational material or around the idea of examinations. It is truly, without sounding like a Hallmark card, but it is truly, I think, about life itself. If students are able to see, notice, and change things in the society around them, in the way that they deal with others, the way they relate to themselves, that is a valuable and worthwhile goal of education. I have been lucky enough to have many students tell me after the semester is over, so once the evaluation is done, as well as many years later, how some seemingly casual discussions impacted their lives. And these are not discussions I necessarily really remember. So one student mentioned that he had read a particular text during a placement interview, and I think the person who was interviewing him didn't quite believe that they had read that text. I started asking him about it. And he said, we had a 45-minute long conversation on it. So I said, did you get the job? He said, yes, I did. Another student told me, he says he suddenly noticed how during the Shera, some working family kids, from across the road from some labor camp were not allowed in to watch the Shera celebrations. And I found that very good, because that same student had been arguing in class over a particular incident in a text, that these distinctions don't exist in urban centers and they certainly don't exist in campuses. And then he said, ma'am, you were completely right. I just saw the security guards do this. And another student who went on to teach herself, she told me that the first time she was asked an uncomfortable question in class, she said her mind immediately went back. She says, what would Anjali have done? And then she said she was able to respond in a positive tone. So if we are willing to undergo change, to change and positively impact students' lives, that's of course a goal, to make a difference. We also need to allow students to make a change to us, to make a difference to us. We need to give them time, not just time in teaching and preparing and evaluation and problem solving, but time in our heads, mental space in our lives. As a teacher, I think we make ourselves vulnerable all the time, and we need to be prepared to do that, not just vulnerable in terms of I don't know or I will find out, but vulnerable in that I go there and I'm exposing what I think, I'm exposing what I feel, and I'm telling them it's okay for them to do that as well. Now, if I'm talking more generally about this place of humanities and social sciences in our lives and in IIT, I may not be the best person to do this because I don't know as much as I should, perhaps, about every discipline in my department. But I would say it is largely to allow students to recognize voices, their own voices and the voices of others, and to recognize these voices as equally valid and legitimate. In literature, I can teach them to question narratives, to look at and examine sources of authority. Linguistics can also show them how language shapes reality and how reality is shaped by language. Philosophy, economics can show them the human and social aspects of problems. For example, the ramifications of solutions. We have a traffic issue here. We can build a flyover, but what would building a flyover do? What will happen to the rickshawalas? What will happen to the cyclists? What will happen to the pedestrians? What kind of a view of society, therefore, am I coming with? So HSS, I think, doesn't offer soft skills. I know that's something we used to be told. We're luckily not told that very much anymore. So I'll reiterate, we don't offer soft skills. We ask the hard questions. We train students that hard questions are there to ask, and the answers are up to us. They're not in any received form of authority. These are questions about responsibility, about equity, about awareness of your place in the world around you, how it is, how you would like it to be, how it should be, how are we going to get there. There are many visions we can have, I think, when we decide to teach as a career. For some of us, it is actually teaching is an occupational hazard. We actually want to do our own research. But in India, we have to teach in order to be able to do that. I think it is the revisions that are more important. As a teacher, I should be able to doubt myself, to correct myself, to admit that I may be wrong, or that I simply don't know. The revisions happen when we are able to see things from a different point of view, to understand and support something, even if we don't agree with it. I think it is this empathy that for me is the most valuable lesson in the classroom, for me as a teacher and for all those who help me both learn and teach. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali. Very thoughtful again. So now we'll move on to the next part of this afternoon, which is a discussion. And what I'm going to do is, at least one of the thoughts I had around this, and which we have also discussed, is to bring up certain questions. And these are questions which likely we have thought about in our careers. Many of our younger colleagues, some of whom are here, would be grappling with these questions as they step into a classroom. And the idea is to get your perspectives on this and see how that can help all of us become better teachers. So one thing, and that at least to me has been a very important consideration, is about the increasing diversity and the heterogeneity of our classes. And let me say it very clearly, over the years, we have moved from I would say, a very homogeneous student body to a much more heterogeneous one now. And that's a very welcome change, right? The institute is making all efforts to increase diversity, whether it be social, cultural, economic, gender, all of these we have been making efforts to increase on campus. So diversity brings with it both challenges in the classroom and I would say also opportunities. And I would like to see your views on it, or we would like to hear your views on it. So what do you think? A diverse classroom, is it a challenge? Is it an opportunity? Amitabh.
Yeah, I mean, I think first, of course, it presents itself as a challenge. And I think the critical thing is that as a teacher, no single student in my classroom should ever feel that they are less welcome than any other person in that classroom. That is my primary responsibility. And the problem is that as an individual, I may have some personal opinion about the various social issues that keep roiling, which change the composition of my class and so on. But in the classroom, I cannot let anyone feel uncomfortable. So right now we see it as a challenge. The opportunities are there, and I'm sure that what the benefits will come with time. At this moment at IIT Delhi, I would say that we're dealing with it as a challenge, but there are great initiatives. The Office of Special Education, I forget the name of the office, where we're looking at people with disabilities and making them welcome, making them comfortable and all. These kind of initiatives are there. I think we've reached out to people who've been on the other side of the digital divide during the pandemic and tried to make them comfortable. So I think the fact that the institution as a whole and we teachers individually are being pushed to understand that people are in different circumstances. This has been one of the great goods out of the pandemic, and we are evolving in the correct direction. The opportunities we are still to see, I would say.
Here, one other thing that I would like to point out, we're talking of all kinds of diversity, and there is also the diversity associated with the incoming class in terms of their level of preparation, right? So we see students of all kinds. Narayanan, as you teach first year classes, right? So you would likely see students with different level of preparations coming in. What do how does this affect your delivery in class? How do you handle it?
Well, well, it is diverse in some sense, but I think there's also uniformity in another sense. Earlier, you probably had some self-taught people coming to class, so there was, in that sense, some diversity. But now I think that diversity is not there. So in terms of their expectations, is more or less very uniform, I think. But there are other expectations that they have. And I think it is more to do with motivation rather than preparedness. Well, if my anecdotal sampling suggests that wherever they go for being trained, the coaches, and I don't use them as professors, by the way, Naveed, they tell them that, look, you only need to walk through the gates of IIT and your job is done. So it hurts us. The demands on us is much, much higher. Well, my take on this is that, like I said, I treat them as adults and learning is their job. I could help. But that said, if somebody has a problem and some limitation, the way I look at it is, with their limitations, if they are able to make progress, take whatever they get and improve themselves and the world around them, I think it's great. It's not a reflection of the grade, but they take whatever they have with their shortcomings, etc., and move forward. Then I think it's great progress. On the other hand, people who come to me with excuses, I have no patience. that's the way I look at it. Yeah, I guess.
So continuing on this, and something that you said, so of course there is heterogeneity in our input in terms of where people are coming from, the social backgrounds, the cultural backgrounds, but for many cases, or in many cases, it's also what their aims are in life, what they want to be, right? Many of them are just crossing the gates, and then they have no idea what they want to be. Some come with very clear thoughts that this is what I want to do. Anjali, this is for you now. So I imagine there are many of our students who come and say, why on earth am I learning English at an IIT, right? And so now I'm talking of diversity here from this perspective of, our ambitions, our goals of the students, not by us. And that should likely make the class very challenging times, right? Because not all of them are interested in the subject that you are offering them, right? And so is that something that you see often, and what do you do about it?
Actually, that's not a question I've ever been asked. Not by students. Other faculty may feel we don't understand why they have to learn literature or linguistics or anything else, but students actually have never ever expressed this thing. Sure, not all of them are in my particular class because they want to be. Some have been slotted that class. They've been, whatever complex algorithm is used, and I'm very proud I can say that word without stumbling now. So whatever is used to allocate them this course or that course or the other course, some are happy, some are unhappy about it. But most of them who have actually signed up for the course are there because one of the reasons, interestingly, they say is that they never got a chance to read as much as they would have liked. Their parents forced them to only study science and engineering, so this is a good opportunity for them to read. Now we come to the motivations and the understanding. So what they understand by reading and what they're expected to do in class are two completely different things sometimes. So that's where we come into a kind of a tussle with questions like, are you sure this is there in the text? Aren't you just overthinking it? But this is what the writer really wanted us to have. So that becomes a challenge because some students actually pick up the basic reading skills more and others don't. Then you have to try and make sure that you don't make them feel silly or ignorant, but it's something they can learn with some training. They may not be as good at it as anyone else. The other problem, and I say problem here, is really that of language. Because with the linguistic diversity, there are students who simply don't understand the English language well enough to sort of respond to a literary text in it. So I have had students ask me, if we read this if we answer in Hindi, is it okay? And I've said it's fine with me as long as you write in the Roman script. It'll take me much longer to read the Hindi script, unfortunately, but I'll read the Hindi in the Roman script. So go ahead. And one thing I do in class is say, please speak in Hindi or in English. And if you want to express it in another language, try and translate roughly what you're saying to us. But there are no other kind of rules like that.
Great. So I'll stick to this for maybe a couple of questions. One challenge that I have particularly faced, and is standing in front of a class of 160 students and trying to figure out in my head, at what level I should pitch the class. And I guess all of us are making, running this algorithm in their minds. Should I be pitching it to the top 20 students in the class? Should I be worried about, those 50 students who are, at the back? And we are perhaps not explicitly acknowledging it, but this is something we solve on a day-to-day basis. What is the material we cover? What is the pace we use, so that we can, carry the largest segment of the class with us. So and the reason I'm also particularly posing this question here is that we have so many of our younger colleagues, and I can see many of them are doing much better than I did at this point. But this must be something that affects all of us. Are there any pointers or any thoughts or any lessons that any all three of you can tell us about, which can assist in answering such a question, or which can help us with this, or is this something that you have not really faced? Amitabh, you are also computer science, so you must have definitely faced something like this.
Yeah. So actually, since I've been teaching third semester kids, I've had this problem a lot in the last 3 to 5 years. The evaluation distribution have come out bimodal. There's one set of people who are doing very well and one set of people who are doing very poorly. So my general solution to that is to ensure that the lecture is very interactive. I do that even online. I do it very interactive so that I'm minute to minute I'm taking feedback in order to get a sense of when is it too much and when is it too little. So so it's like you can think of it in terms of classical music concert. Sometimes the exposition is slow and sometimes it goes fast because we have to keep every side engaged. So I think it's okay if you go a little fast or you go a little advanced, but come back quickly and maintain a middle path in the class. So that the people who need extra excitement get excited and they follow the pointers, but the people who can't come along with you are not made too uncomfortable. So I think there is a middle ground. And I think one thing, now that we have these lecture recordings and so on and so forth, we are providing many different ways of learning to the students, which is a very good thing. So if you want to watch the lecture again, you can watch the lecture again and so on. The texts are also there. So the diversity of learning styles we can cater to, and we should be very aware that different people have different styles, different people have different speeds. And when it comes to evaluation, I mean, simple practical ideas are that the basic evaluation is pitched at a middle level, but optional problems, challenge problems are provided for the smarter kids. Little extra help is provided for those kids whose background doesn't allow them to catch up. So we have to diversify our offering in such a way that we take care of both ends of the class and also the big middle. That's the kind of practical ideas that I've tried to develop.
Well, I think classroom teaching, to get this diversity, that's difficult. Evaluation is a different issue. One could always, and it is for a major part of the class, it is finally the evaluation that is important. We could always address that. I think that's not a big deal. There are questions that one sets of the knowledge type, recall types, and things like that, which would ensure that people go through unscathed. But classroom teaching, unless one has some feedback, and invariably, and this is the problem, the discussion gets hijacked by the people who are on the ball. And it's very tough to tell somebody that, look, although it's taking us afield, to say that, look, let's discuss this in private outside. So it is a problem. Unless somebody who is struggling, and in IIT, and I think it's probably true everywhere, 160 is a small class these days for us. It's more like 650. I mean, who would want to be embarrassed by asking a question which would show your ignorance? It's got to be the teacher. I think in IIT, it's worse than most other places. So it's very difficult to address this. So you pitch it at some level. That's, I mean, that's the way I can't see.
No, I think we don't have an answer, but or there cannot be a very clear answer to this question. But I would also like to hear from anyone here. There's so many best teachers here, and so if anyone has any thoughts or comments to add to handling this issue, or we can always come back later if you want to keep your questions for the end. Okay. Moving on. So I have been. One
thing I do though.
Yeah.
I tell them up front that you have to work hard for the top grade and the bottom grade.
Okay. Yeah, that's useful. That's useful to know.
the only way, to constantly stop and ask. And if you and look around, I mean, we don't have that advantage here, but in a live classroom, you look around and you can tell whether someone's like on their cell phone or is actually not understanding. Both need to be questioned. I ask the cell phone user, who were you writing to? And the person who's not understanding, I say, ask me the question that you would ask, that you would go out of this room and ask. So, you have to just keep checking back and making sure that you make sense, I think.
Moving on. So, I do not know how many of you have been watching Kota Factory. I have been watching it. And so, I realize that I guess most a large number of our students are coming through these coaching institutes. And at the end of so here I'm still talking of BTechs perhaps. And so, this is likely not true for our PhD students.
No, that's not true.
No, masters, yes, they are still going
No,
through
even
coaching.
even
The
PhDs. I mean, our own, at least in the sciences, the CSIR get.
Oh, people are coaching
Well,
for getting.
I somehow don't like the verb crack anymore. It's people are taking time off to crack an exam. So yes.
Okay, so we want a typical BTech. We would want that they come in, from one of these factories. At the end of 4 years, we want to see them as independent thinkers. People who can do a startup, or people who can, change the world. Right? This is what we want from every one of our students. So there is a lot of, or at least our aim is to move them, to provide them some higher level learning objectives or learning skills, right? And where do you think? So I think at least one challenge is to identify when do you stop holding their hands and let them go and think for themselves. Of course, Narayanan, you've been saying that you do it with every class, right? You just let them, those who want to learn, learn. But do you think this is a challenge, especially in our first year classes, where they are transitioning from this very spoon-fed mode to an independent thinking mode? And do you think that's where many of our first year students find it particularly hard? Do you think this transition needs to happen at a later stage, or you think this is okay? So I've perhaps framed it a bit vaguely, but that is the purpose. How do you think this transition should happen, and what is in your view the right time, or you think they come prepared for it and we should throw them at the deep end, so to say?
I think that, so Shantanu is sitting right next to you. So we know that the problem of making sure people get through the system is a real problem. And we can't, we can't ask everyone to jump into the water and be okay with the fact that 20% of them actually sink. That's not really allowed in our system. So we have to accept that the society puts these people through factories and sends them here. And also we have to accept that there is a challenge to make them independent. And I don't think there are any general formulas, but I think that in every course at every stage, the instructor must look at their practice and decide how much support, how much independent thinking, and both these components have to be non-zero. It cannot be that you're only, I mean, maybe it's because I teach third semester UGs. I feel that first year has become a little bit like a 13th standard, right? But maybe the people in the fourth semester feel the same about my class. But I feel that at every stage, we have to make a clear distinction in our pedagogy that I will support, but I will also challenge, and some increment in their independence has to be a goal for every class, and those increments have to be larger as we go through the programs. That's that's what I can say about that.
Yeah, very fair. Anjali, you want to say something on that?
So I don't really meet the first years now. We used to meet them when we had a prep HUN 100 course, which was an introduction course. But I think, yeah, you just stop. You just stop holding their hands. You're there for advice. You're there for any special help, and that has to be made clear. But the one thing I like to make clear to students is, okay, you got through here, you got up to here with the help of your coaches, your schools, your parents. Now you're on your own. The tough decisions you make, what classes to take and how to be in those classes. And you're the one who bears the consequences of those decisions. Someone is there to help you, but be grown up enough to ask for help. So I don't think there's a moment where you can cut the umbilical cord.
Yeah.
But be open to give advice, and that's it.
Great. There are plenty of first year best teachers in this room, right? You have a question, Professor Sharma? Yeah.
Help with the issues as well.
I just
Yeah,
wanted
please,
to
yes.
wanted to say that a nice discussion is going on, but what Amitabh said about humility is probably the most important thing. There is so much arrogance in our system that it kills the entire interaction between students and the teachers and so on. I mean, I remember some 20 or 25 years back, I had organized a Saturday meeting in our department of all faculty members that what is wrong with us? What should we do? And one word, if I summarize, of the entire conclusion was arrogance. The entire discussion actually came out, there's too much arrogance. I mean, the students think no end of themselves. They think they've come to IIT, so, they have conquered the world. The faculty thinks, they know it all. So, and same thing goes to the staff also to some extent. I mean, if you really talk to them, how they behave with other, in their peers, in their families, actually, so there is too much. So this humility, which Amitabh has brought in, is extremely important. And the question that we should ask in the class to the students, why don't you understand? I mean, if somebody asks, the question is not whether the student understands, whether the question should be whether I can make him understand. That is the question we are not asking. We are asking if the students are not understanding. They are not interested. We are not making them interested. The fault lies with us. To some extent, I have realized this, that if you do just lectures and so on, they will be interested to some extent. But, if you do a little bit of, connect things to, real life around you, some small demonstrations, even in the lecture room or some small things, they are heavily interested. They are heavily interested in learning all those things. So it does make a lot of difference. And this arrogance, I mean, I always say that if you think you know too much, just visit the library. There's so much to learn. And if you think you have a particular subject, you have known it all, just teach a class. You will understand how much you know. Because unless you can teach and explain something to a student, you don't know that subject. I mean, this is a running battle between me and my wife, that she tells me to explain something, if I'm not, then you don't understand. So this is the, so, unless you can explain something, and the fault is, if the student is not able to understand, the fault is not with the student. He doesn't know, of course he doesn't know, but you are supposed to teach. You are supposed to make it so known, so simple and so understood that it should be known. So it's, and what Anjali said, it's a two-way process. I mean, we are teaching the students are teaching us all the time. I mean, I know there's so many things I've learned while teaching, although I always thought that I knew all this, whatever subject I'm teaching. So it's all the time, it's a two-way process. And unless we sort of understand and sort of, what we say, internalize this fact that it's a two-way process, and also it is our job to explain to the students, will not be there where we should be.
Yes, thank you, Professor Sharma. I think what you said there, when I have to learn a subject, I offer it to teach, because then I know I have to learn it well to be able to teach. So, Patek, you wanted to say?
Can I speak without? I have two questions. If you really watch the list of best teaching faculty, most of them are non-engineering. They are from and it is actually a trend throughout. And 90% of BTech engineers don't become engineers. And they come to the class and say, sir, we don't want to be engineers. We don't want to learn. We are just doing it because we have to get the grades. And that's the reason engineering students don't get, teachers also don't get best award, because they're not interested in our course. And for last 50 years, this is a phenomenon, and nobody is bothered. The country is not bothered. Our best students are wasting their 4 years. Is anybody bothered?
You know, that is actually, that's something I was trying to
And
allude to
last
when I
one more
said,
point.
our students have certain ideas on what
So
they
why
want to
don't we
do,
have
but,
a general engineering course and leave
Yeah.
best engineering course to let the engineers only 20% to come to civil engineering? Why have 120 students? Let 80% students who don't want to be engineers come and have a general engineering. Teach what MBA is taught to the students. Why teach them civil engineering?
So Shantanu is here for exactly this reason, and I'm sure he will
Nobody's
take note of all of this in his next curriculum review.
Nobody.
No, so I don't want to answer this, but just wanted to tell you that this discussion has been around for a while. And we in fact had a group of faculty members look at this issue particularly, and it was a committee chaired by Professor Srinivas Viravali, but it had a representation from across different departments. And they have in fact submitted the report recently. And it's a pretty interesting document. So we'll of course work with it in coming times through either the curriculum review process or independently. So we'll consider it. But as you probably recall, this was a proposal initiated by Professor Balakrishnan a couple of years back. And that in fact, the departments all turned down. I mean, that was the conclusion. Still, we brought it to the Senate for a discussion, and it was really that discussion which triggered or advised that such a committee should be formed to look into it, and that's why we have a document now. But yes, it is something which does require wider discussion. It is not a problem that can be sorted out easily, but because it has implications in many ways, particularly if we want to do it in isolation as an institute, given the ecosystem that we have in the country. But I think something is and that's all I can say right now. Something is on the anvil as far as that is concerned.
Thanks. Okay, let me put all three of you in a spot, right? So tell us an embarrassing moment you had in class, Anjali. Yeah, only one for today.
So I think it was when the LHC was first set up, and I had never used PowerPoint to teach, and I don't even think I knew what PowerPoint was until I gave my interview here when I was asked, "Will you be needing slides?" And I was like, "What for?" But those days I was trying to be very fancy, and I had a USB drive and everything, and I walked up and was trying to get the screen to come down, which took a long time, and I was trying to get the system to start, and of course it wouldn't start. So I had a mouthful to say about how this was not the Indian Institute of Technology, but the Institute of Indian Technology, and nothing ever worked, and then one student put his hand up, and I said, "Just wait, at least wait till I've settled down." And he said, "Ma'am, you haven't turned on the
Machine.
the main switch, basically." So you knew that was coming.
Yeah, Indian technology, of course.
I'm the Indian here.
Narayanan?
Class, I don't know. My most embarrassing moment is out in Quora, and all that is what students tell me.
It's public knowledge, is
It's
it?
public knowledge, but like Chetan Bhagat, the name is a little bit twisted, but you can figure that one out if you did the search. That's what people tell me. Well, I have looked at it too, although my side of the story is a little bit different. Nonetheless, in classes, when I remember in 702, that was one of Sachin Maheshwari's a big project to open up a teaching classroom in 702. It was a big, wide one. If you talk to the middle, then the other two sides won't hear you. And I didn't have a microphone. I never used a microphone. So, but at the end of the class, a student walked up or walked down. And then even now I have this habit of hanging my keys to my back belt ring. And it was there, and he says, "Sir, this is what I learned." And I said, well, I didn't know what to say. you know, and you were trying, you were sweating. This was sometime in August, September. So afternoon class, and you're trying to do some chemistry, physical chemistry, whatever. And I said, well, I was speechless. And now is it's not very embarrassing for me, but it is, yes, in a sense. But the punchline is the person who did this happens to be Deepinder Goyal, the CEO of Zomato. So that is.
Amitabh, you have an interesting.
Well, I do have an interesting anecdote, although some parts of it I should gloss over. I was teaching a tutorial in Block 6401 some 10, 12 years ago. And luckily, only the first 3 rows were filled with students. The back windows were open and 2 monkeys came in. Now, I was a little taken aback. Monkeys in the room, that's not safe. And before I could do anything, the monkeys revealed themselves to be boyfriend and girlfriend in a way that I don't really want to describe at length. So I was like aghast. At the same time, like because I myself had studied in Block 6 as a student, I also had this urge to tell someone that, hey, look at what those monkeys are doing. And that my students, they saw me freeze and they saw me looking, and then they turned around and they saw what was going on, and one of them made to attack it. And I was like, listen, guys, just because you don't have girlfriends, don't mean you should bother other people. Now get out of the room. That was the one funny incident. Luckily, there aren't those many monkeys around here anymore.
You understand? Okay, sorry, there is some small gap. I have one of my own, and this was the time when we used to read out attendance, right? Because of course now you cannot anymore because the classes are. So I'm going over this computer sheet and I see a name Palak. I don't remember the surname now. And for some reason, I read it out as Palak. And this was a major. So this should have been Palak, right? Except that, those nuances are not there anymore. So I'm sure this kid, and my apologies if they're watching this, got ribbed by his classmates on my choice of name for him, right? Palak Sharma or some such thing instead of Palak. Good. So I think we have a hard deadline of 4:30 and it's 4:27. So let me not pose any more questions to this esteemed audience, esteemed panel, sorry, and also an esteemed audience, of course. I'm not amiss there. Thank you so much for. Okay, are there any other questions? Sorry, good. So this is a comment from Aditya saying SBL 100 became a core course so that Amitabh doesn't get embarrassed by biology. Oh, okay, good one. So I should have.
Thanks, Aditya. If you had instituted it then when I was a student, then this problem wouldn't have
Would
occurred.
not have been there, indeed. Can you roll up the chat to see if we can see there were any other questions? Education is not a popularity contest, of course. If you could find ways for attendance of such important events. Oh, these are comments. Okay. Any questions from the audience? A quick one before we close. We are at 4:28. I don't want to run the clock here. Okay. So then we will, Prita, you wanted to add something? Okay. So good. Thank you so much for having joined us, the panelists especially, and the rest of the audience too. And I think we have these recordings available, and this should be interesting for all of us to watch. Some very interesting ideas have come across, some very profound thoughts. I think what Amitabh started off with, that itself. Requires a lot of deliberation and discussion, I would say. But I hope we have, brought in some questions here, which, we can all, hopefully this pandemic ends soon and we can start having coffees together at Amul or upstairs, and then we can all be discussing these at greater lengths. And this should likely, hopefully, arrange more questions of this kind. What is teaching about, and what are we doing right? Can we share those things? What are we doing wrong? Can we correct those, right? And learn from each other, and especially our younger colleagues, because end of the day, we are still known, around the world for the quality of our teaching, right? We want that to be, we want our quality of research also to, to make a significant impact. But till that time, it's the quality of teaching we provide that's most important. And so we need to continue working on it. So thank you once again. And I hand it over back to Shantanu for the next part.
Thank you, Naveen, and thanks to all the panelists for extremely interesting thoughts. I did have a few questions of my own regarding lab classes, regarding preparation for PhD students and so on, but we leave that for another day, because we'll be engaging with different departments and all the faculty in this curriculum review process, which we are initiating now. So we'll have time to discuss that as well. So thank you anyway for your comments. They were extremely useful. I've noted down quite a few interesting thoughts, and Narayanan, particularly for your quips. I think that they also added the necessary humor to the session. Let us then move on to the second part. We're exactly at 4:30. So let us move on to the second part of today's session here, where we'll be handing over the Excellence in Teaching Awards. And like I mentioned in the beginning, this is covering 4 semesters, semester 1 to 2019-20, semester 2 2019-20, and then semester 1 2021 and semester 2 2021. And like Director mentioned in his opening remarks, there was a committee set up under DDSP to revisit this whole way in which teaching awards are given, and a pretty extensive report has been prepared. Amitabh was part of the committee and one of the most significant contributors, I should say. So that will of course go through the processes through the ECS and Senate. So most likely the next time these awards are given, we'll have a different way of evaluating them. But of course, for the present awards, this has been done with the system that is already approved by our Senate for giving the awards. So my request, Professor Rao, to hand over the awards. I'll be reading them out. Saurabh here will be. Yeah, so I think it will be given here. So the first awards are for September 1, 2019-20. For first year classes in that particular semester, we do not have any award. So we move on to the second category, which is classes with large enrollment, which means as per our current processes, that is a class with more than 60 enrollment. We have 2 winners in this category. Professor Supratik Gupta from the Department of Civil Engineering for CVL 771. And we have Professor Anurag Sharma from the Department of Physics and now with the Optics and Photonics Center for the course PYL 115. Then we move on with the classes with medium enrollment, which is of enrollment between 15 and 60. And the winner in this category is Professor S.G. Deshmukh from the Department of Mechanical Engineering for the course MCL 751. And finally, we have always, for every semester, we have a award for a new faculty who has joined the institute in the last 5 years. So in this category for semester 1, 2019-20, the winner is Professor Sujit Manna from the Department of Physics for the course PYL 723. Thank you. And then we now move on to semester 2 of 2019-20. For first year classes, which is a big class, obviously, the first year classes, the winner is Professor Puneet Sharma the Department of Mathematics, for the course MTL 101. For classes with large enrollment, this is more than 60 enrollment, the winner is Professor Sanjay Dheer of the Department of Management Studies for the course MSL 711. For classes with medium enrollment, we have two courses, two winners. The first is Professor Naresh Tandon of the Center for Automotive Research and Tribology for the course ITL 702. Unfortunately, Professor Tandon could not join us today here. The other winner is Professor Shubhendu Bhasin, the Department of Electrical Engineering for the course ELL 705. For the award for the new faculty, the winner is Professor Sandeep Sukumaran from the Center for Atmospheric Sciences for the course ASL 757. Then we move on to semester 1, 2021. For first year classes, we have three winners for the course MTL 100. Professor Biplab Basak, the Department of Mathematics. Professor Ekta Saha, also from the Department of Mathematics, for the same course, MTL 100. And Professor Devdeep Ganguly of the Department of Mathematics, also for MTL 100. For classes with large enrollment, more than 60 enrollment, the winner is Professor Pramit Kumar Chaudhary of the Department of Chemistry for the course CML 511. In the category of classes with medium enrollment, we have two winners. One is Professor Shivaji Rao Gholap of the Department of Chemistry for the course CML 721. The other winner is Professor Sangeeta Satra of the Department of Material Science and Engineering for the course MLL 701. In the new faculty category, the winner is Professor Deepak Kumar of the Department of Physics for PYL 551. Finally, we come to semester 2, 2021. In the first year classes category, the winner is Professor Aditeshwar Seth of the Department of Computer Science and Engineering for COL 100. And jointly with him is Professor Ragesh Jaiswal, also of the Computer Science and Engineering Department for the course COL 100. For classes with large enrollment, more than 60 enrollment, Professor S. Nagendran from the Department of Chemistry for the course CML 525. For classes with medium enrollment, we have two winners, both from the physics department, but different courses. The first winner is Professor G. Vijay Prakash of the Department of Physics for the course PYL 752. And the joint winner with him is Professor Joby Joseph, also the Department of Physics and now with the Optics and Photonics Center for the course PYL 756. And finally, in the new faculty category for the last semester, the semester just gone by, we have two winners. First is Professor Priyanka Kaushal from the Center for Rural Development and Technology for the course RDL 728. And Professor Eri Ikeda for the Department of Management Studies for the course MSL 896. Thank you, Professor Rao, for giving him with awards. Before I kind of close the session, if Professor K.K. Pant, the Dean Faculty, is online, if you would like to say something. Yeah, he in fact knows it.
Professor Pant, do you want to say?
Yeah, in fact, wanted to. In fact, yeah, he had his hand up, but I'm not sure if they're able to connect from here. You unmute.
You can unmute yourself now.
Yeah, so very good afternoon to all of you. And first of all, I thank all the panelists, right? It's, I think, a vision for the future also, and very effective deliberations were made in total. And I just really thankful to Professor Roy also for taking this initiative and having a kind of panel discussion, and which is need, I think, in order to improve the quality. I congratulate to all the awardees, right, because it is their efforts and teaching is the prime objective, as I mentioned earlier also. So all of us, I think, need to learn how to make the teaching effective, especially now in view of the online teaching, right? There are many challenges for us. So although I could see that the attendance is a little bit poor, because I was expecting that all faculty members should attend the sessions, and in order to understand, right, the how to move forward in order to make the teaching effective, and how to look at the future, right, in IIT, in order to make the entire the not only teaching but also the other, right, research domains, that is also important for the future promotions and all other activities. So I think I stop here today, and we will have a lot of deliberations off and on in this regard. So once again, I congratulate to all the awardees, and I think please share your thoughts on different, right, emails as well as on the forum, so that this can be, right, taken as a lessons, right, and why we can move forward from here, how to make the teaching effective and how to improve the teaching infrastructures also in the institute in total to improve the other things, so that the teaching may be effective, more and more effective. So I thank you again, Professor Amitabh, Professor Anjali Multani and Professor Kurut for sparing their time, and all the other awardees. Thank you very much for joining this session. So I'm sorry I could not be there because of this. I had some other meeting also in between. So thank you very much for all the efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pant. Professor Rao, would you have some final remarks? No, it's okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for attending today's session, and congratulations again to all the awardees. And I must also put on record my thanks for my colleague, Professor Pritha Chandra, who it was really her brainwave and how we put the whole thing together. And she had been having several meetings also with the panelists to make sure that everybody's on the money and getting the job done in time and so on. Otherwise, disciplining IIT faculty is not a very easy job. I can tell you that. So, but anyway, so thank you, Professor Pritha, and thanks to Gaurav and everyone else in our office, and thanks again to the panelists and Naveen, of course, and all the winners here. Congratulations again. So we close the session here for today. Thank you.
Oh, really?